From a young age, I kind of always had the broadcasting bug. I always was enamored of, being able to watch the game from my couch and how people were doing that. How is it possible that we could watch a sporting event and it feel like we're there? That aspect of it, and of course, there's a production and there's a technical director and there's a director, and I didn't know all of that stuff, but the people that we see are the commentators, and the people that we hear are the play-by-play and color announcers, and that was kind of something that grabbed my attention for a young age. And I feel like, contrary to a lot of kids that are 10 years old, I kind of already thought about it as a profession and kind of set my sights on it by the time I got to middle school. And then I had a job shadow in the 8th grade. We were in a school district here in Greenwood where we had to go on a job shadow in 8th grade. And I remember it was February during a basketball game, and I job shadowed Rickson Lane, who at the time was the play-by-play voice for Lander basketball. And so that's where I got my start. I was a part of my first production in 8th grade, and then by the time I was in 10th grade, he was sick and needed someone to fill in. And so I was there, and I kind of got my start with Lander in 10th grade while I was a student here at Greenwood High. And by the time I was a senior, I had pretty much taken over the reins of doing the major sports at Lander, and that's when I kind of worked my way into the radio scene with the different stations around Greenwood, and one of them was being a production assistant for Greenwood High football on the radio by the time I was a senior in high school. So I feel like what I did as a middle schooler and as a high schooler, and the way that I thought about a live video or live radio production, really kind of geared my interest more so than others that they just expect to watch the game on TV. But I sort of had a certain curiosity about how the game was being broadcasted to me, and I would say that's kind of where the first seed was planted in my broadcasting career. As far as favorite moments in my career, there's a ton. I've been very blessed to do a multitude of sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, the main three. I've also done a lot of lacrosse and soccer, and I've dabbled in some field hockey and softball. Really, my favorite moments is calling a game in a playoff setting when the stakes are the highest. And I've had the pleasure of doing that, whether it's high school football or a conference championship game in women's soccer, or a March Madness game of Lander, or the Peach Belt Tournament basketball game. I really have an affinity for basketball, and especially college basketball when it gets to the postseason where it's one and done. There's no other basketball tournaments in the U.S. that do that, or